This story is a personal account of a terrifying experience that I had. I never imagined that something like this could happen in a place as ordinary as an office building. I hope you find it as chilling as I did. It was a typical Friday evening, and I was eager to get home after a long week of work. The office was nearly empty, with only a few of us left. Finishing up some last-minute tasks, I decided to take the elevator down from the 10th floor, a routine I've done countless times. Little did I know, this ride would be anything but ordinary. As I stepped into the elevator, I was joined by 3 of my colleagues: Lisa, a cheerful and hard-working woman; Mark, always serious and focused; and Tom, who was relatively new to the company but seemed friendly enough. We exchanged tired smiles, ready for the weekend to begin. The elevator doors closed, and we began our descent. Almost immediately, the lights flickered, and the elevator came to a sudden halt. We were stuck. At first, we thought it was just a temporary glitch. Mark pressed the emergency button, but there was no response. We tried calling for help, but our phones had no signal. Panic began to set in. Minutes turned into an hour. The air grew thick, and we felt the temperature drop. Lisa shivered and hugged herself, while Tom tried to pry open the doors with no success. It was then that we heard the first sound, a faint, eerie whisper that seemed to come from the walls of the elevator. "Did you hear that?" Lisa asked, her voice trembling. We all nodded, eyes wide with fear. The whispers grew louder, more distinct, but we couldn't understand what they were saying. It sounded like multiple voices, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. Then, out of nowhere, the lights went out completely, plunging us into darkness. I felt a cold hand brush against my arm, and I jerked away, heart pounding. "Who's there?" I shouted, but there was no answer. Mark fumbled for his phone to use the flashlight, but the light only seemed to make things worse. In the dim glow, shadows danced on the walls, taking on shapes that shouldn't have been there. Lisa screamed as she saw a face appear in the corner of the elevator, pale and ghostly, eyes filled with sorrow. "Help us!" the apparition whispered before fading away. We were all paralyzed with fear, unable to comprehend what we were witnessing. Suddenly, the elevator jolted and began to move again, but it wasn't going down. We were ascending, faster and faster, until the numbers on the panel would be in the highest floor. We were in uncharted territory, a place that didn't exist in the building's layout. The elevator stopped, and the doors opened to reveal a long, dimly lit corridor. It was unlike anything we had ever seen, old, decrepit, and filled with a sense of foreboding. Reluctantly, we stepped out, knowing that staying in the elevator was no longer an option. As we walked down the corridor, we saw portraits on the walls, depicting people from different eras. Their eyes seemed to follow us, and their expressions changed as we passed by. Some looked frightened, others angry. We realized that these were the spirits trapped here, victims of some long-forgotten tragedy. The whispers returned, now clearer. "Find the room," they urged. "Free us." We followed the voices to a large, wooden door at the end of the hall. Pushing it open, we found ourselves in a room filled with old office equipment, dusty and unused for decades. In the center was a large desk with a ledger on top. Mark approached the desk and opened the ledger. The pages were filled with names, dates, and causes of death. "These are the people who died here," he said, voice shaking. "They were employees, just like us." As we read through the names, the spirits began to appear around us, their faces a mix of hope and despair. "Please," one of them said, "help us move on." We knew what we had to do. We read each name aloud, acknowledging their existence and their tragic end. With each name, the spirits seemed to grow fainter, their expressions softening. Finally, as we read the last name, the room brightened, and the spirits began to disappear. One by one, the temperature rose, and we felt a sense of peace wash over us. The door to the room creaked open, revealing the familiar sight of our office hallway. We stepped out, and the door closed behind us, sealing away the past. The elevator was waiting for us, and this time, it took us safely to the ground floor. We emerged, shaken but alive, each of us forever changed by the experience. From that day on, I never stayed late at the office again. The memories of that night lingered, a constant reminder of the unseen world that exists just beyond our perception. Even though we made it out safely, the events of that night haunted us. We agreed not to speak of it again, but the silence did nothing to erase the memories. The office felt different, as if the walls carried whispers of the past we had unveiled. Weeks went by, and I noticed changes in my colleagues. Lisa, once bubbly and full of life, became quiet and withdrawn. Mark, The ever-stoic worker seemed to be constantly on edge. Tom, who had initially seemed unfazed, started avoiding the elevator altogether, opting for the stairs even to the highest floors. One evening, as I was preparing to leave, I found myself alone in the office again. Despite my resolution never to stay late, a pressing deadline had kept me back. As I packed my things, I heard it again, that faint, familiar whisper. "Thank you." I frowned. See, the voice sending chills down my spine. It was the same voice I had heard in the elevator. I turned around, but there was no one there. The office was empty. Heart pounding, I grabbed my bag and headed for the stairs. As I descended, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Shadows seemed to flicker at the edge of my vision, and the air grew colder with each step. When I reached the ground floor, I saw Lisa, Mark, and Tom standing by the entrance, their faces pale. "Did you hear it too?" Lisa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded. "We need to figure out what's happening," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. Together, we decided to investigate further. We couldn't go on living in fear, constantly looking over our shoulders. The next day, we started digging into the building's history, searching for any clues about the spirits we had encountered. We discovered that the office building had been constructed on the site of an old factory that had burned down decades ago. Many workers had perished in the fire, their bodies never recovered. The ledger we found in the mysterious room contained their names. Determined to put the spirits to rest, we arranged for a memorial service to honor the lives lost in the fire. We invited our colleagues and even the building management, explained the tragic history behind the site. It was a solemn event, but we felt it was necessary to acknowledge the past. As we stood in silence, paying our respects, a sense of peace settled over us. The whispers ceased, and the air seemed lighter, as if the spirits had finally found the closure they needed. From that day forward, the strange occurrences stopped, the office returned to normal, and we began to heal. The bond between us grew stronger, forged in the fire of our shared ordeal. Though the memories of that night in the elevator would always linger, we knew we had done the right thing. We had given the spirits a voice and a chance to move on, and in doing so, we had found a way to move forward ourselves.